drawing really underlines every aspect of the work.
I wanted to touch on that because you mentioned that you did go to art college. So there's already a kind of a learned way of dealing with the world. And you deal with big things, landscapes.
Yes.
And it's the act of perception often rather than, or as much as the act of creation that is the artwork. Artists who work in the landscape, you're extremely modest about it. So there might be monuments to futility or resistance, or whatever you want to call it, in the fire stand. When you see the film in there ascending, it's breathtaking at the end where you see the achievement of the steps leading up, and then it's only after a while that you realise there's a little figure in it that's you that has made that. But I suppose the point is that unlike a lot of artists who do work in the landscape, they leave themselves in it often. They become the measure against which you can judge the landscape. Whereas you don't, you erase yourself. You think about Anthony Warmley, I mean, he puts literally himself into the landscape, so you always have that human relationship. And even if it's small, it's monumental. But you don't. You seem to be very modest in the way that you leave traces, or you annihilate traces, or you draw our eye to the way that the world works around us and the forces that might be invisible. You erase yourself, which I think is a very distinctive form of practice.
I think it's not conscious actually. It's what I feel really, that the work can speak for itself. And what I love about making works in some of these environments, particularly in the more recent years, like in Japan, is that the people who are local to there actually feel they're very connected to it, and they're the ones that are actually getting to know it in all the seasons more than I can. So there is and I love that sense of that it can belong to anyone who wishes to go and visit it. I really do love that. I don't feel possessive when I leave a work. And so that's very good news for Lucy. I feel the same, and actually I am noticing, as for somebody who don't know, I've just completed a work at Hooker Hall, which is very different, which I'm sure we'll speak about in a minute. But Lucy, who lives very close to the work on site, is bringing me very many observations that I myself cannot make because I don't see it every day. My route is drawing from observation, and he would talk a lot to us about the way Cézanne observed, and Seurat. Seurat is a very beloved, I love his drawings very much. And gradually I was looking at a lot of the Renaissance artists, the way they observed as well at that time. And for 10 years I really did work very passionately and with a great deal of commitment, both from people and in landscape. Because I understood that it taught you a structure and a discipline about working. And so those were artists in my early years that I think I really was looking at a lot.
Can you tell us what Seurat looks like for you? What is Seurat?
Oh, what a lovely question. So Seurat for me, so I experienced a very specific, I think it was really my first, what I would call real revelation. I was just going into a drawing class when we were drawing from fellow pupils' heads. And Robin showed me a drawing it's one of the studies for the bathers, and it's actually the study of one of the figures lying down, and it's a shoulder and neck study and head study. It's incredibly simple, but it has all the form that you need to know in it. It's so beautifully articulated. And then there's the very famous drawing of the bather sitting, which I also love and still love very much, where there is relatively so little over mark making to produce such a living, breathing form. And I really say again, the Auerbach is a very beautiful example of that downstairs. And it was sort of electrifying. And then I went into the class that day and I experienced a concentration that I had never experienced before. And suddenly I knew how to see and draw it. The drawings come after I've made the sculptural work, the drawings are a reflective process. So in this case, with the drawings of these, it was really a process of discovery. I just started drawing on the paper. I didn't quite know how to, in a sense, conjure out the work of ascending, and I'd started with a series of pencil drawings, which were very, in a sense, very controlled. And then it was, but I really wanted to work with that yellow ochre. I work with colour all through my practice, and red ochre as well. So it was then literally cajoling the steps out of the sort of chaos of actually building up the surfaces of the ochres. And what I wanted to convey with these works was the sort of luminosity of this tough stone in the quarry. So I'm in a way trying to draw the feeling I have of being in that site and been working that. I wanted it to feel like they were really going up, and that they had in some way a sensation that you could actually almost put yourself up on those steps, even though they're a drawing, metaphorically. And that they felt, it was really wonderful, because as I began to understand how to do them, I thought, oh, this is so like how I built the steps. I was just really pulling the form out of the rubble, as it were. So these feel very, very true to the work there, even though they're very different. So they, in my mind, Simon, they feel actually all very close together. And then in the case of Parallel Space, which is the other work in there, I knew that work really was about suspending darkness within the bigger darkness of the quarry. But filming darkness is very, very complex, and it was very liberating to then be very straightforward about, in a sense, conjuring up that darkness through time by building up the drawing very, very slowly. Because if you overlay the charcoal on paper, it goes very flat. And I wanted you to feel that velvety, that physicality of the darkness that's contained within the quarry. It's a really velvety, enwraps you as you walk up this passageway, and I wanted to get something of that. So and even when I'm working from observation, it's again, if I work over a sustained period, I'm wanting to convey to you, in the case of the work I'm in the room with the Turner, I want to give you the physicality of the landscape, their presence, as if you are actually there yourself. And I have to say the films it's the same aspiration. That the more I can, I know you and I have discussed that difficult line between when you're showing the making or when it's just simply the work itself, like in the Fast Steps. It's a very pure form of filmmaking. But I really do want to invite you into these places, and if it means showing the sound of the material, the weight of the material, then so be it. If that can give you a more intimate experience of, if you can't walk on these steps, then as near experience as you can. If the film can somehow draw you in, so you can allow your own body and imagination to wander, then I feel they are doing something on their own terms. And I think the physical work and the really intimate engagement with the stone, in this case, and the working of it and the learning of it, is also what allows me to understand the work better, because there's an intimacy, in first and foremost, it's not an intellectual process, it's a doing process. And through that, my understanding comes, and I really trust that. So I think, even though it seems like it's very, very heavy duty, it's also where I find revelation and inspiration. So there's this very beautiful sort of synergy between, yes, you're expending your physical energy, but you're also in that process discovering what it is you might be making. And in the sense that, that revelation I've had in the recent piece at Abbot Hall, where I actually feel it's more aligned to the air than it is, even though it's a big part of stone, it's strangely so much about the air, and I had no idea of that when I embarked on it, and so I think that's it's a very rather reciprocal process. Yes, the effort is there, but there's an excitement in making work, so you need your rest very much, and you sleep like a stone. We all get challenged by stuff, but if we just anyway go for it, don't think too much about it and just go for it. Not jumping off a cliff, but yes, navigating seas in the winter. The reward is so great. It was very calm, by the way. But I think it just, when you all know, when we overcome those butterflies and somehow jump in and go for it, the reward of it is so immense in terms of how it allows you to see. And the winter wall is a beautiful example of that. When I made the film downstairs, it was at a very extraordinary time. We were still in lockdown, weren't we? I was allowed to take the ferry over to the Hebrides to film, and where the winter wall is very remote indeed, even from the bothy where I stay in the Hebrides. It's a good 2.5 hour walk. But I happened to go there, and when it was a very arty, it was in February 2021, when it was very, very cold everywhere in Britain, particularly in Scotland. I mean, all the locks had frozen, all the water rushing down the rocks, everything was sort of frozen in motion, and it meant the sea was very calm, and I had 5 clear days of sunshine, which is really rare in Scotland. And I was able to take our small 13-foot boat all the way round Ardvec and Ardbor to the south of Ardbor, which is about a 40-minute boat ride, to go and film Winter Wall, which meant I wasn't also exhausted after a 2.5 hour walk. And I was really lucky to be able to observe it over 3-4 days. And so by talking to someone like Alexandra and fine-tuning my courage, actually it was wonderful to be able to bring that film downstairs. Sound is really important because it's a real sensory sense of ours. You know, we have our vision, but our vision is very connected to our intellect, and it can sometimes actually make our heads work too much before our whole body works. Whereas I think sound sort of envelops us in a really interesting way. I think it's profoundly sculptural sound, and I think that when I started working, so Angel is I've been collaborating with now for all the fast acts, all the fast act films, and Angel is prepared to go as far as I do with work, and for as long as I do, so he's a rare person. Angel, what would be very wonderful is if you describe what it's like, maybe to illustrate about sound. If you just talk a little bit about discovering the underwater sounds for fast act, which are so vital, because that's what the stack is hearing. Yeah, come to the mic.
Yeah, the underwater sounds, I guess, were a discovery for both. You know, we just didn't know you wanted to explore that, and with water, you know, it's a medium that we don't know what's going to be there. You know, it could be anything. So just putting microphones there was exciting, you know, as a thing to do, and also then what we discovered with, you know, the sounds of the rocks, the breathing. You know, there's some breathing of the bubbles and fire.
Yes.
I think yeah, it was a good idea.
Actually, these films have a real layering of sound. So what you're hearing is, Angel creates this incredible library of these rich sounds, the embers, the suck and the pool of the sea. And then what Adelina does is, when I'm working with her, we try and create this soundscape. So actually the sound is the most sculpted part of the films. So we begin by understanding the structure of the images, but if you could see our sound layers, or Adelina's sound layers, they are so complex, and this is all the experimentation that Angel has done. So and often the most unlikely sounds are the ones that we use, so that that's what you're experiencing in the fast acts, where you feel you're in another world, because you sort of are. And remember, we don't hear that when we're doing the firings. That's what's extraordinary. So that's a very exciting part of it. I remember a really moving moment. I think I'll tell it better than you, because you're too modest. Angel, we were in very, very high winds. It was the first winter, and we were getting a lot of hail. And from the get-go, even at night, Angel said, I think this is a very good wind. I'm just going to go outside for a bit. And he came back and he said, I think I've got some really interesting stuff. And it was like a gale force wind. But for us, you know, we think of when wind goes onto the microphone, and it's awful on our ears. We're all like, oh. This was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever heard, because I'd never heard wind without feeling utterly buffeted by it. Because wind is a really big element that can really pull you down a bit, actually. And it was so beautiful, Angel, because it was completely how we imagine it without the physical onslaught of the wind. It was absolutely exquisite. I think it was really important to do the solitary part a lot, you know, to sort of get to know the work, and really, instead, to get to know myself within the work. When I first started working with people was in Libya, when it was compulsory to travel with the Tuareg guys I was with. It was before the Arab Spring, and I marvelled at how uninhibited I felt, actually, with them being around. It was the first time I'd worked with people. And in fact, the Tuareg were quite laid back, so they didn't actually physically help me, but they were very brilliant at, because I was a bit scared of the heat when I went there. They were really good at looking after our welfare within the desert, and that made me understand and also, most importantly, is that they were showing me their landscape. And although we didn't have a shared language, you know, when you're walking and eating and sleeping alongside one another, you have this, as you say, for a moment, you have this really beautiful encounter with one another, even if you're very different. And I really loved that. And then, so when I went to Namibia, I was very clear I wanted to work with guides. So working with people has sort of evolved. And then particularly when I started making the fast acts again in 2016, I then actively was seeking assistance. And there are many graduates here at the moment that, you know, I really, really value that teammanship. And you're right, I haven't thought about it in sort of motherly terms, but there must be a subconscious element. But it's a great privilege to work with a team of people. And you're right about that intimacy. When you work alongside one another, you have a closeness that's very uncontrived, because you're combining your purpose. You know, in the case with, you saw Angel is doing sound, Winnie's on camera, there's the stovers, the builders. You're all there to make this work happen, in the sense of the fast acts. And that has been so rewarding that I now seek it, and I now actually need it as well. I'm not as strong as I used to be, and I really value it so much. So for instance, the team I had for working on the Hookah Hall piece, where it was a very intense period of time, it's just about you're learning. I'm teaching them as many skills as I've got. They're teaching me skills. There's a lot of cross learning going on, and also mutual support to get a work done. You know, maybe to extend an hour of a day just to get another step finished. So you have, and then you have all the in-between moments of the living, because often we're in the same, due to low budgets, you know, we're all in the same accommodation. So you've got those lovely in-between moments, you're relaxing, making a meal together, and which we have as in a normal family. And I think that you can then share work, particularly a lot of them are art graduates or literature graduates. There's a lot of synergy in the discussions, like sort of having a conversation with friends or colleagues. that you aren't thinking about, but it's just happening because you're there in the same space. So you build up that, and that feeling of commonality, which I've always wanted to give the children, and with Chris likewise, you know, if we can give that to other young people, that's a really fantastic feeling. Back to Japan, I wanted to work in Kanegawa Quarry where I made this, and I managed to persuade the British Council to give me some money, and I was on the aeroplane out to Japan, and I thought, right, I don't have any permission from this quarry owner. He keeps saying no, and here I am on the plane. Right, that's fine-tuning courage. And then I thought, that's fine. So I went to see Hashimoto-san, and I said, you know, hooray, here I am. You know, great. And he was like, no. And I thought, oh, my heart sort of dropped to my boots. So I then went to see the Komatsu City Council, who I got to know over a few years, who'd invited me and helped coordinate the working in parallel space. And there's a fantastic woman, Miss Yukari, and I went to her and I said, can you help me? And she's an amazing woman that just gets so much done. We have very little shared language, but she, for some reason really loves the work, and she just said, well, I had to translate her, leave it with me. And so we went back. I had to wait for a week, so I was really sort of like, and I was completely blank, Robin. I had no idea what I was going to do in this quarry, but I was just waiting with bated breath for this meeting, which I had to wait for about 6 days. It was excruciating. And then Miss Yukari arrived, and there was Hashimoto-san, and there was me sort of very nervously hovering around the quarry shed, waiting. And 10 minutes later, she just came up. Oh, it's good. Okay, you can start. It's like, oh my goodness. And I don't know how she extracted the yes from him, but she did. And I went to draw in the quarry, because at that point I still had no idea what I was going to make. All this great build-up, but I had no idea. And then I sat in the quarry drawing, and the little drawing that you can see in the cabinet, I had my drawing books, but I also had my written notebook. And I was just looking, and I thought, okay, so actually, what is it that you love about this quarry? And I thought, wow, this incredible cliff, I know. And then I thought, okay, well, you can't do that scale, so what are you going to do? And so then I just thought about this very, very simple line, and as you know, some of my work has taken different eye lines to places, so I thought, yeah, okay, that's very straightforward. And then as I was drawing, I just thought, whoa, what if I did steps? And within half an hour, I had complete clarity of what I was going to do. So then I thought, oh, well, that was a bit quick. Why don't I try? What about other ideas? Okay, you could do this, you could do that. And it was like, no, you know what